The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Thank you. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to testify to the light. And this is the testimony of John. When the Jews from Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to him and asked him, "Who are you?" he admitted and did not deny it, but admitted, "I am not the Christ." So they asked him, "What are you then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." So they said to him, "Who are you? So we can give an answer to those who sent us. What do you have to say for yourself?" John said, "I am the voice of the one crying out in the desert, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as Isaiah said." Some Pharisees were also sent, and they asked him, "Why then do you baptize, if you are not the Christ or Elijah the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water, but there is one among you whom you do not recognize, the one who is coming after me, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to untie." This happened in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There was a story at a town in which there was a very famous and talented comedian who could make everyone happy and laugh non-stop. And in town there was also a well-known psychologist who could treat anyone who came and asked for help. So one day there was a man asking for an appointment at the office of the psychologist, seeking for counseling. So the psychologist came and met the patient and asked, "So what was your problem?" The man said, "My life was so miserable, I cannot find happiness." The psychologist asked the man, "Is it about your finance?" The man said, "No, I'm actually quite wealthy." "So is it about your family?" "No," the man answered, "My wife is perfect, and my children are excellent." And after asking many questions, the psychologist still couldn't find any clue about the man's problem for his unhappiness and misery. So the psychologist told the man, "I heard there was a very good comedian in town. I think you can go to his shows for some good laughs, and then I think you can find your happiness again." The man looked at the psychologist and said, "Thank you for your advice, but I am that comedian." Today is the third Sunday of Advent, or the Sunday of joy, of rejoicing, of being happy. It is not simply a part of our countdown for Christmas, but it is more importantly a solid reminder for us that joy and happiness, just like the color of the day, rose, are essentially helpful in every journey that we are taking. What is life without suffering, challenges, and failures? But what is life without joy, happiness, and hope? But a comedian who always makes other people laugh still faces an eternal crisis of being depressed and lost, and of not being able to feel joy and happiness in his life. This example invites us to live, to love, and to work, not only on the surface, but also in the depths of our hearts. This is why the prophet Isaiah in the first reading invites us to rejoice, but not simply in a superficial way, but to rejoice from within, from the depth of our souls. I rejoice in God with all my heart, because in my God is the joy of my soul. So the first thing I'd like to share with you today is that joy and happiness are not hard to find, but to maintain and to live in joy and happiness require not only the efforts from our own strength, but also from our trust in God, who is actually the everlasting joy. Now, when we talk about joy as it is, it doesn't mean that we ignore or look down on all the moments of life. We are called to pay attention and to recognize that all moments in life are connected and are meaningful. That's why we can still be joyful in one aspect of life, while in another aspect, worries and sadness still present. If we look around us or even look back at ourselves, there are those who are not very wealthy, but they are still joyful. There are those who are sick and weak, but they are still joyful. There are those who live by themselves, like me, but still joyful. St. Paul reminds us in the second reading from his first letter to the Thessalonians to rejoice always, to pray without ceasing, and in all circumstances give thanks. If our spirit is directed upward to God, we would also feel lifted with joy in everything we do. So the second thing I'd like to share with you today is that joy doesn't come alone on its own, but it can only be felt and received in a perfect way within the actual context of everyday worries and suffering. How can we feel joy without feeling worries and suffering first? How can we compare and contrast to know what is joy and what is suffering? If we are able to find and to embrace even the little joy that we have in life, we would also be able to see the presence of God. And in the gospel today, we heard about John the Baptist. Some people thought he was the Christ. He was the chosen one. But John said no to all of those misidentifications. And by affirming that he was not the Christ, John also affirmed that the Christ was already present among them. Christ was among them, but they didn't recognize him, and they still went around looking at the wrong direction. The humility and honesty of John the Baptist invites each one of us to look back at the way we live, to see if we also favor some kind of superficial realities and become too lazy to spend time to pray and to make Jesus' teaching become solid realities. When our world is just a click or a swipe away from us, we become lazy to get up and make efforts. But our house won't be cleaned just by watching YouTube. Our relationship won't last long just simply by texting. And our faith in God won't survive if we live it just on the surface and never bother to go deep. Our society of consumerism and technology may spoil us that joy could also be something pre-packed and ready to use. But joy, sadly, is not eligible for one day or free shipping. Despite how joy could be just a simple thing in life, lots of work and lots of time might be needed to create it, to recognize it, to appreciate it, and to spread it. So in this third Sunday of Advent, the Sunday of Joy, let us spend some moments to reflect on the 3 points that I just shared with you today through the readings. First, remember that joy and happiness are not hard to find, but to maintain and to live in joy and happiness require both our efforts and God's help. Second, joy doesn't come alone by its own, but it could only be felt and received in a perfect way amid everyday worries and suffering. And third, Joy is not pre-packed or free-shipped, but lots of work and lots of time might be needed to create it, to appreciate it, and to spread it. Joy is a result not only of our own efforts, but of God's too. Joy cannot be detached from worries or sufferings. And joy is not a lazy and a labor-free process. May God, who has begun a good work in all of us through joy, may also bring it to fruitful completion. Amen.